Hello, everyone. Welcome. So happy to have you all here, and really ecstatic to have Jon here speaking tonight for many, many reasons, which Doug will share. So my name is Jessica Mori, and I'm the Executive Director of Inward Bound Mindfulness Education. We call it iBme, and our organization leads meditation retreats for teenagers around the country and now also in Canada. And so all of your gifts tonight go to our scholarship fund. So we have a policy that no teen is turned away for lack of funds. So we're really trying to keep that commitment and that tradition. And this summer we gave out over $200,000 in scholarships. Wow. Yeah. And so every thing that you offered really does go to transform a teen's life and potentially change the trajectory of their path. Doug will introduce Jon. So thank you so much.
And this all started, it all started with Jon. Like that's where it started. And it wasn't like he invented it, but he made it accessible. Like to millions, like around the world. And the world is is such a kinder, kind of more generous, like aware world, just since he's introduced this and made it accessible for everyone. So it's like mind-blowing, like what an honor it is to introduce him. But Jon Kabat Zinn, yeah.
Well, I'm not a news anchor, so there's no news. Or actually, there's a lot of news, and it's wonderful to see you come out tonight in support of this fantastic program iBme that Jessica started and is really delivering a kind of experience of awe and wonder to people who might not ever experience it. And as Doug so beautifully said, it's not just outer awe and wonder, but it's coming to know yourself inwardly. And then in some sense seeing that there's really no separation between inner and outer, and if you want to live a fully authentic life, then one needs to cultivate that life just the way you would need to cultivate a field and cultivate the vegetables or whatever it is that you're growing in the field. That things don't just magically happen. And when we zone along on autopilot, it's almost as if we're losing touch with our life or our lives, and then there are some peak moments where we feel good about it, and then we're always striving to connive or arrange everything so that we have more and more peak moments. And because we're here at Middlesex, and I have a deep connection to Middlesex, I have not driven up this driveway since my daughter Nashawn graduated from here in, I think, 1998 or 2000. I can't even remember. 98, thank you. Okay, I'm glad. So, but I used to drive here virtually every day with either Will or Nashawn. So this is, to have that experience of the beauty of this place. This is a very, very unusual, very singular, extremely privileged place that's doing something to meet that sense of separation and privilege in a way that I think has enormous authenticity. And I really bow to all of you students and teachers and administrators and everybody else in the Middlesex community who's nurturing this magnificent unfolding, because an education is the sort of most magical flowering of all. And we can't really understand who we are in relationship to the world and to each other and to the deep knowing, the deep understanding of the way the world works without really being drawn into it and also being drawn forth from it, which the word education meaning both, draw out. So there are a lot of things that we actually already have within us. They don't have to be injected into us. And when education uses that kind of immunization model of education, where you just inject somebody with a semester of Japanese history and then they'll be immunized and hate it for the rest of their lives, or algebra or trigonometry or whatever it is, oh no, sines and cosines, never again. You know, but that's a kind of immunization model as opposed to a kind of impassioned, loving model of like, there's nothing more interesting than realizing that this world is like unbelievably incredible, every aspect of it. Including, I don't know if you saw the New York Times today, but photographs of some planet going around Saturn that seems to be, you know, have a hidden ocean that's liquid. I mean, photographs, you know, because this Cassini spacecraft has been circling around Saturn doing its thing. Can you believe people earn a living figuring out how to get to Saturn and then exploring all this stuff and then sending the pictures back to us and figuring out there's water there and maybe life, and that's just like today's paper. So I am actually a news anchor. I didn't realize that. It's just I'm anchoring a different kind of news. And I'm sorry that Dan wasn't able to come because, you know, he tells the story of like his life and how mindfulness really catapulted him into a new way of being in relationship to it. Now mindfulness is virtually on everybody's lips. You know, it's like Time magazine covers and, you know, and Anderson Cooper and everything. And Anderson, by the way, is extremely powerfully affected by the retreat that he did with us. That actually, it wasn't obvious from the way they cut it all, but that I led that retreat with my son, Will, co-led that retreat with him. But it changed his life. And I tell you that only because that's also news that you're not going to read anywhere else, although he virtually says it if you go to the CBS website. But what I want to do this evening, for those of you who are like, just heard about it, and it just seems like a concept, and a lot of news reporters, and I talk to a lot of news reporters, they say, oh, I've heard about your concept of mindfulness, and I go, just please shoot me now, you know. I'm just like, how do I even go from that to? And so you have to do a certain kind of linguistic, artistic aikido on the person's mind so that they don't write something that has nothing to do with what mindfulness is. It's not a concept, it's not a catechism, it's not a philosophy. It's a way of being. And the more I've practiced it, and I've practiced it improbably for somebody who grew up as a street kid in New York City, okay? For me to be a meditator is like really improbable. So that says to me that like, if I can do it, pretty much anybody could be a meditator, because like the chances of me slowing down, dropping in, moving from doing to being infinitesimal, and I've been doing it now for, you know, close to 50 years. And you know how it is. You pick up things, they're big fads, and then 5 years later you're into something else. And that didn't happen to me. 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. So it's a way of being. And if I have to say it in one word, it's a way of, the word is relationality. It's a way of being in relationship to everything. Everything. Your body, for instance. Have you noticed everybody here is in a body? I mean, we have a funny way of speaking about it in English, like, because we talk about my body, but nobody knows who the my is that's claiming that it's that entity's body, you know, my body. But we don't examine the my. Thoreau, again, because this is Middlesex, and because it is said that Thoreau really was enamored of Estabrook Woods, is that correct? So I have to, you know, quote from Walden. Many of you will drive by it tonight, or have. He said, I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately. Okay? To front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what they had to teach. and not, when I came to die, discover that I hadn't lived. When we're zoning, and that was before the digital age, that was before, Thoreau didn't, this is inconceivable to Thoreau. I know the people who designed this, by the way, and the meditators. Thoreau, even in the 1830s, was saying, if you're not careful, and almost every line of Walden is a rhapsody on mindfulness, although he did not use the word. But his whole engagement was to actually pay attention to what was speaking to him as he would sit in his doorway or stand up to his nose in the Walden Pond and observe the life forms, plant and animal, and the sun going across the sky, and the thoughts going across his mind. And he said it was like the greatest work in the world, far better than any work of the hands that he could have done, while meanwhile his neighbors were all plowing fields. And he's like a good-for-nothing, just sitting there. And he's never been forgotten because he's really touched something very, very profound and it's a thread of American beauty. It's a thread of sort of American culture that a lot of us don't really understand, but are starving for, or yearning for. And the faster things go, the more we, in some sense, need to not put on the brakes, but understand that that domain, or this domain of infinite self-distraction. 15 years ago, Linda Stone, who worked at Microsoft at that time, described it as continuous partial attention, these things. This was before the iPhone. But just the laptop computers, sort of generated a state of continuous partial attention because now it's like forget about the partial. No attention. Self-distraction is at epidemic levels. And the younger you are, the more you are susceptible to that. And if you don't believe me, just read Sherry Turkle's studies about teenagers and young children exposed to nothing but the digital age because they weren't born during the analog age. They might even prefer simulated trees to trees. I don't know, but Sherry Turkle from MIT has been studying this in great detail, and it's just, we need to, in some sense, modulate our relationship with that. So, again, I told you I could talk about this forever, but let's not do that because of the time frame. But let's actually just, how many of you would say that you have a regular, if not daily, meditation practice that's as important to you as brushing your teeth? That you would no sooner not do it. Okay, so hold your hands up for a minute. Just hold them up high. So that's about half the audience. And I want to really acknowledge that if we'd asked that question 15 or 20 years ago, well, first of all, I'd be speaking to a completely empty auditorium. We do have to be aware of our surroundings and make serious choices about what we're going to do. So this is for all of you, not just the ones who didn't raise your hands. This is something that is so simple, it's easy for the thinking mind to immediately trivialize it and say, it's a lot of nonsense. There are many, many places out there doing mindfulness and putting it out there on the web in beautiful ways. And I'm not knocking the web. I mean, we're just living in a different world. And we need to learn how to be in wise relationship with that world and with this analog body and mind of ours. That can be so easily diverted, which is one of the meanings of entertainment. It's a diversion, but diversion from what? If you divert yourself from your whole life, even your education may wind up not being useful because you forgot what Middlesex was trying to teach you, and you kind of went off someplace. And then maybe you wake up before you die, if you're lucky, but why not die now? Get it over with, especially for you young ones. And then you got the rest of your life ahead of you because okay, if you're dead, you don't need to worry about anything anymore. So let's just see what this is all about. Whether it's the surface of some planet going around Saturn, or whether it's the surface of this planet, which in fact, our little old human beings have been giving our own planet a fever, which is having major consequences that you and your children are going to have to deal with because we haven't been aware enough. But now that we know about it, that's part of the domain of mindfulness. It's not just like, oh, it's about the breath. Or it's about feeling good. Like, oh yes, I'm so stressed. I need to just kind of sort of calm myself down. I'm not knocking that. That's all fine, well, and good. But this is actually about befriending yourself even when, you know, the proverbial stuff is hitting the proverbial fan. Especially when the proverbial stuff is hitting the proverbial fan. Or when you're in pain or suffering, emotional suffering, physical suffering, whatever it is, that's not a time to turn away or to contract, but that's our natural instinct. So this is a kind of antidote of sorts. It's saying, if you care to, you can actually drop into a domain that's yours, that you were born with. It's not something you have to acquire, that is available to you 24/7, that can transform your relationship with the good that's unfolding in your life, so that it's like you really tuned into it and don't, like the next minute, self-distract. The bad, the difficult, the unwanted, the terrible, that's part of the human condition. And the neutral, what you don't even notice because it's not about you, you know. So like, how many people drive through a toll booth, you know, and they, with a person there, and they just treat the person like a machine. Because it's like, doesn't concern me, I don't know that person, I'm gonna be gone in a second. But so in a sense, we dehumanize ourselves all the time because we get really wrapped up in our own personal pronouns. The grammar and the geometry of me, what could be more interesting? You know, we're all in some sense continually caught in a narrative about me. And there have been brain studies that, if we had more time, I would tell you about that. There's a whole, what's called default mode network, where, you know, when you default to, like, they just say, you just sit in this fMRI scan and don't do anything. And you can't bring in Time magazine or something like that. You go into this default mode network, and most of it is like mind wandering. And where does it wander? It wanders to, like, what's going to happen to me? What's good? What's bad? What's this and that? So a lot of the time, the mind is not even here. It's lost in thought. We say, you know, that person's out to lunch. It's true. You know? And most of the time, if you start to pay attention to what's on your mind, you'll find, and it's quite staggering, so slightly embarrassing, that most of the time, your mind is not here in this moment, even though this is the only moment you will ever be alive in. So, for instance, one favorite place it loves to hang out is the future. I'm sure that's not true at Middlesex, but everywhere else, people worry a lot. You know, people worry about the future. And Mark Twain is famous, as you know, for having said, you know, there's a huge amount of tragedy in my life. And some of it actually happened. But most of it didn't happen because, you know, we're not smart enough to think about what's actually, we're not good prognosticators. So we worry about stuff that's never going to happen. It's like driving your car with the brake on. If you learn this young, if you learn that you don't have to believe all your thoughts, you're in so much better shape than somebody who doesn't know that. Because if you start believing your thoughts, well, that's actually how you fall into what's called depressive rumination. You know, and that's like, you know, 50% of the society at some point or other in life will experience serious major depression. Okay? But if you know the antidote to it, it's like, don't believe everything you think. I mean, on my bumper sticker, it says, don't believe anything you think, you know. And just hold it in awareness. See, it's not just nihilistic. It's saying we have this other capacity, this thinking over here, and then this, and you're taught that up the wazoo here at Middlesex and everywhere else, starting from early on. But one thing you're not taught is how to be in relationship to your thinking. And they don't even teach you that, except at Middlesex and places that are now, that actually there's this whole other capacity you're born with that's native to you, that could be your default mode because it's more powerful than thinking. And you know what it's called? It's called awareness. It's called awareness. It's like, doesn't have much sexiness to it, you know. There's like awareness. Is that all he's talking about? Like, who cares about that? I'm aware that I'm uncomfortable, that it's late, I want to eat, you know. That's not awareness. Awareness is when you don't have an agenda and you just fall awake. Now, we are super good at falling asleep, but it turns out falling awake is just about the hardest thing in the world for us human beings to do. So again, learn it young, it will really serve you in good stead. A lot of the time, as I said, the mind's in the future. The rest of the time, where is it? The older you get, the more you know this, is in the past. And the present moment, which is the only one in which we can feel anything, see anything, smell anything, touch anything, learn anything, love, express wonder, express awe, the present moment starts to get a little bit eradicated, imploded, because it's all thought, most of it past, future, and all about me and what I want, what I don't want. So always trying to get what I want, pushing away what I want. That's a prescription for suffering, for stress, and then for blaming it all on outside forces so that I don't have any responsibility for it. If my own life were only different, there'd be no stress and I'd be fine. But it's all these other people that are driving me insane, you know. Do you know what I'm talking about a little bit? And I'm talking fast, not because meditators talk fast, but because I don't have that much time and I want to sort of give you some element of it. So I'm going to stop talking now and invite you to actually move into a domain that's yours from the beginning, which is wakefulness, and I mean fully awake, attentive. My working definition of mindfulness is the awareness that arises from paying attention. We can all do that, and teachers would love it if their children did that, if their students did that. Paying attention on purpose, so intentionally, even when you don't feel like it, in the present moment, because that's the only moment, as Thoreau knew. And then here's the kicker, non-judgmentally. And you start to pay attention to your mind and you begin to think, you have judgments about virtually everything. So non-judgmentally doesn't mean without judgment. It means don't judge the judging, just suspend it as best you can. Okay? And then the other thing that I'm assuming you're going to be all so inspired by this evening with the three of us that you're going to do this for the rest of your lives, that I will also give you the most fundamental pointer I've come to in many, many decades of teaching, and that is, it's never about the objects that you're paying attention to. Okay? So a lot of people think, oh, meditating, oh yeah, that's about breathing. And breath is very important in meditation as an object to which you could anchor your attention because it's in the present moment. And so it's very convenient, and it's also changing, so it's not fixed, and it allows you to be fluid and flexible. But it's never about the breathing or the sensations in the body. Another beautiful object of attention is to sit with awareness of your body sitting here breathing. So you can do that now. You don't need to wait for me to ring a bell or say, go. You know, you're sitting here breathing. What's more, you're such a genius that you can actually decode the vibrations in the air that are coming because of my taking oxygen air from my lungs, passing it over my vocal cords, wagging my tongue and my lips in such a way that it puts out vibrations in the atmosphere that are coming to your tympanic membrane and your eardrum and creating electrical signals that you can follow in your auditory cortex and link with your prefrontal cortex and everything else, and the hippocampus and the, emotional evaluation. And this long sentence is actually completely grammatical, and you are the genius that can decode it. And you didn't learn that at Middlesex or anywhere else. That's native to you. Okay, so let's actually now experience that awareness in silence. So pick an object if you want to. Just the sense of the body sitting here breathing. But awareness is so big that it could hold anything in awareness. It could hold the whole room of all of us sitting here and breathing. Okay? It doesn't matter. It's the same awareness no matter what the object. And so just drop in and see if you can actually inhabit the space, the field of knowing that awareness is. Not cognitive, conceptual knowing, but like a deeper knowing. So silence, yes, and also awake, and also no agenda. You're not trying to get anywhere to some special state. The state you're in is plenty special if you're here for it. Eyes closed is fine, eyes open is fine. Sitting in a dignified posture is what we usually tell people when we're training them in this kind of thing. But that's your own assessment. If you're really awake, any posture is dignified. And just resting in awareness, moment by timeless moment. In other words, in the now. Letting go of the past, letting go of the future, just this moment. Just this breath, just this wakefulness, underneath thinking, in between thinking. Befriending your own life, unfolding exactly what Thoreau was talking about. In the only moment you ever will have in order to be in relationship to it. And there's one more thing, if you have not had kind of these kind of instructions before, and this is brand new to you, that you need to know, and that nobody can do this. It's impossible, practically. So as long as you're doing something, you've missed what I've been pointing to. Okay, this is not about shutting off your thoughts, or, so you'll notice that like your thoughts are shameless. They'll just come in, even though, hey, give me a break, I'm trying to just have a moment of silence. No, your thoughts are going to assault you, and your emotions, and your memories, and your worries, and your planning. And so you're sitting here trying to have a nice meditative moment, and all of this stuff is happening. That's the curriculum. That's not a problem. That's what it means to be human. So it's not a problem unless you make it into a problem. So then you don't have to fight to get rid of it, make yourself into some better, like, really sage, no thoughts anymore. If you had no thoughts, they'd lock you up in some institution. You wouldn't know how to put your pants on in the morning or write a check. Who writes checks anymore? But so when the mind wanders, when you notice that you get carried away in a thought stream, and this is inevitable, it's not like, failed meditation 101, it's inevitable. Your mind is going to get caught by something. There's the knowing faculty that can at some point appreciate and perceive that the mind is no longer here. It's no longer aware of the breath or sitting here or hearing my voice or anything. It's like you're having dinner with somebody in LA. Or your mind is now on that planet, I don't even remember the name of it, out in Saturn. Or Pluto, for that matter, which we just visited a short while before. And here's the extra instruction. When you notice your mind is not on the object of attention, that noticing is already the attention. That's the awareness that's already back. And so you don't need to beat yourself up and say, or force yourself to get on back to the breath. Come on, be a good meditator. Back to the breath you go. none of, because that's judging. And remember I said non-judgmental. So you don't give yourself a hard time. You just very gently recognize where the mind is. And that recognition, that's the core awareness. So in a sense, that's why it's never been about the breath. The breath is just a clever way, because with the American Express credit card, you know how they say you can't leave home without it? Same with the breath. So it's always available, and especially down here in the belly, as far away as you can get from your thinking mind, it's helpful to just come feel it every once in a while. Not control the breath, but just feel it. But it's not about the breath, it's that you can feel it. That feeling is a form of awareness. Your hearing me is a form of awareness. Tasting, touching, smelling, seeing. So the 5 senses, and then there are more: interoception, proprioception. Again, as I said, I can go on for hours about this stuff, but the most important thing is this resting in awareness. And you don't have to understand it, you don't have to know anything, because that's all conceptual and it's limited. I'm not knocking conceptual awareness, but concepts, like any thought, for instance, this is why awareness is more powerful than thinking. You can have any thought, no matter how brilliant or how deranged, and if you're aware of it, you'll know whether it's actually brilliant or deranged. But without that, you may go with the 99% deranged ones and miss the brilliant one. Okay? So there are an awful lot of reasons why this is incredibly compelling, and actually the fundamental core of education, especially for teenagers and kids in high school or in elementary school, especially in the inner city, you know, where this is now, teachers are bringing mindfulness into the classroom, coming up through the floorboards. They're not waiting for the principal to give them permission or teach them how to do it. Why? Because they're going out of their minds. They can't teach. So that's the last thing I'll say. You could think of mindfulness as kind of like exercising a muscle or tuning an instrument. The instrument of attention is at the core of learning, okay? Without paying a certain, or offering a certain kind of attention, the world doesn't speak to you because you've missed it. And that attention sometimes requires an enduring not knowing, gazing at a fish or a triangle and drinking it in underneath all your thoughts about fish or triangles or how boring it is to look at anything for more than a fraction of a second. And then the world, in some sense, is apprehended completely differently and understood completely differently. So the real meditation practice is not this, or standing on your head, or doing some artificial carving out of time to practice what we just had the slightest little taste in. It's essential, it's absolutely necessary. It's important to do it every day for an extended period of time, like tuning the instrument. You teach this to children in school, they start to learn how to be still and how to listen and pay attention. And then you can't teach them to recognize connections. The brain does that by itself when it's prepared, when it's tuned. But the real meditation practice isn't this. There's more. And what's more is that the real meditation practice is how we live our lives moment by moment. Okay, so that's just in some sense the tuning, but then there's the playing. And the playing is everything. If you're a parent, there's never been a better environment for cultivating mindfulness or seeing how mindless you are than being a parent. So your children are like live-in Buddhas, live-in meditation masters, and they are so good at this, they will push every single one of your buttons, and then you can contract and get into this me, you, I'm the one with the power, or whatever it is, or you can hold it in a larger awareness and see the interrelationships, the relationality, and see with eyes of kindness, with eyes of compassion, of understanding that, there's a huge amount of suffering, a huge amount of stress in growing up, in finding out who you are, and that's if you're lucky. If you're not lucky, like most of us, we may die just the way Thoreau said, without ever, in some sense, having lived. And so I want to invite Jess and Doug to come up on the stage, and we're going to now have a larger dialogue conversation with you folks. We may run a little bit over time, I'm afraid, but so what? Time is just another thought. And if you have to go, you should go. But I will say that there's something about mindfulness that's really timeless. I mentioned it in the guided meditation, but it's like, if we live our lives in this moment, moment by moment by moment, life becomes available to us in ways that are virtually unimaginable. And so I don't want you to take my word for it, but it relates to virtually every aspect of life. So I'll just end this comment with a very brief poem, okay? Because this is an academic institution, and you should know, those of you who are young, that poetry is not stupid, and it's not opaque, and it's not impossible to understand. It's like the poets are just they're meditating. And so they don't necessarily think in sentences. They think in implication. They are implying things that they need you to complete by resonating with, same with painters. This is different, so so there's a whole neuroscience about this, which I won't go into, but here's the poem, and it's by Derek Walcott, who's a Nobel laureate from the island of St. Lucia, so an Afro-Caribbean poet. And maybe some of you know it, maybe it's even studied here, but it's called Love After Love. The time will come when with elation you will greet yourself arriving at your own door. And each will smile at the other's welcome and say, sit here, eat. You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to yourself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, who you have ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit. Feast on your life.